And welcome back to the Standard Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Jono, and today I'm bringing you the Week 13 Waiver Wire episode. Let's jump into this. All right, so let's talk about these waiver wire options. Before we just jump into who I like here this week, let's talk about a couple critical injuries here. They're not crucial to this waiver wire pickups. However, they are critical to your team, which may require you to pick up one of these guys. That's going to be Amari Cooper dealing with a rib injury and Chris Olave in concussion protocol. Obviously, A.T. Perry was out there too as well. He'd be probably the first guy I'd look to go get there, but they weren't targeting him heavily this past game. And then Amari Cooper, you could talk about Cedric Tillman, and I'll briefly mention him as an honorable mention stash play anyway based on his usage. But let's go to the main slate of waiver wire pickups that I want to talk about. First one's going to be Pat Freiermuth. I think everybody's going to have him on their list as the main pickup here. Tight end position used to be volatile. To me, this year, it's been a lot more even keel. You've had a lot more of the tight ends sort of in that middle of the pack, being able to give you, 50 and a touchdown, or be able to give you 80, 70, 80 yards in a game, a lot better than in the past where you were streaming tight ends and not knowing if you would even get a target to some of them. So Pat Freiermuth, 48% owned. He was 9 for 11 last week for 120 yards. Huge game for the Steelers offense. In terms of fantasy-wise, it doesn't look like it for Deontay Johnson, only getting 50 yards. Same thing, 40-something yards for George Pickens. However, when you look at this team as a whole, they had 400 total yards of offense. That's the first time they've done that all season, that big. And to me, Kenny Pickett's playing really good football. He's protecting the ball. He broke Ben Roethlisberger's record for most completions without an interception streak. So look for this team to continue to go through the air. Freiermuth actually had some pretty good routes run to as well, a little bit deeper routes, seam routes that you normally see from these bigger or less bigger, more athletic tight ends, like your Njoku's or your Kyle Pitts and players like that. However, Freiermuth is sneaky athletic. He's able to get it done. He's a big guy, big body, hard to tackle. So look for them to keep going to him as well. Let's move on to some wide receivers, because that's pretty much going to be the bulk of it for me here as well. You're going to have Greg Dortch as one of my top pickups here. We said him a couple weeks ago too as well. We talked about him and Wilson in the past here, but it looks like Kyler Murray and Greg Dortch just seem to be firing on all cylinders. Greg Dortch is only 8% owned. He's had 17 targets in the last 2 weeks alone. So this offense is going to have to funnel through the passing game. They haven't been able to get a lot done through the ground game. I know James Conner coming off that knee doesn't look like the James Conner the first couple weeks of the season. So Greg Dortch to me is one guy that's going to benefit. He's a much better downfield receiver than Rondell Moore is. Michael Wilson has been dealing with injuries as well. I just think this connection from last year and this year too as well for Dortch is working well with Kyler Murray. So look to pick him up. I also like Tutu Atwell. He's been on our list before, and this was before the Cooper Kupp return. But Cooper Kupp doesn't look the same. Everybody can agree. He was out getting his ankle taped early in the game, Sunday. On top of that, Tutu Atwell was 3 for 3 for 76 yards. He had the big passing reception early in the game. So Matt Stafford, I know, has a connection with him and built that rapport early on in the season. Look for that to continue. I'm not looking for high targets and high volume here, but he's a good receiver. He's going to find himself open even when those other guys are out there. So he's another one that to get there too as well. Curtis Samuel, he's only 39% owned in sleeper leagues here. He was targeted 12 times over Thanksgiving, ended up having 9 receptions for 100 yards. He has been much more on page with Sam Howell, and when Sam Howell is throwing the ball for 300 plus yards, usually Curtis Samuel's the benefactor of that too as well. So I like Curtis Samuel here. He should be owned in all leagues. He may be a great flex play from week to week. I don't love the schedule for Howell, but he could be a flex play for you because he's going to be open on a lot of underneath routes and a lot of dump offs too as well, and he's great with the ball after the catch. In terms of running backs, there's only one that I really, really like here, and that is Dearness Johnson for the Jacksonville Jaguars. So he has been getting at least 7 carries the last 2 weeks and kind of supplanting himself as a good number 2 role for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Obviously, Tank Bigsby's still there, but when you're getting 7 carries behind your main running back in ETN, I think you are putting yourself in a good position to get more touches. And what he's doing with the touches is fantastic. He is a stash play for me, especially going to the playoffs, especially if you're a ETN owner as a handcuff. He looks like to be more explosive than Tank Bigsby. Speaking of handcuffs, before I get into these playoff acquisitions here for teams that are definitely going to be in the playoffs, let's take a moment to talk about a couple honorable mentions that made our list here. 2 receivers in Cedric Tillman for the Browns and Jalen Hyatt. Cedric Tillman has played at least 85% of the snaps in the past 3 weeks. He was 4 for 5 on Sunday for 55 yards. I expect him to continue to grow in this offense. Now, DTR was throwing to him much more than I believe you're going to see anybody else throw to him right now. PJ Walker tends to lean towards Moore instead of Tillman, and obviously Cooper. But to me, when DTR's in there, he look like the better quarterback, and DTR is going to want to throw to the guys he likes. And Tillman was the guy in a couple tough third downs to get the yardage and get the first down for the Browns in this past game. And then Jalen Hyatt, he had his best game of his rookie career so far with 6 targets, 5 catches for 109 yards. The only thing I don't like, the reason he's an honorable mention, is he faces a tough Green Bay secondary, a tough New Orleans secondary. He does get Philly, who's weak against the secondary, but it's still Philly in that pass rush against the Giants' offensive line. And then he's got the Rams after that, who's a pretty decent secondary as well. So I just don't like the matchup there. I think, this whole Cinderella story with Tommy DeVito is going to kind of come crashing down a little bit in the next couple weeks for the New York Giants, which is unfortunate as a Giants fan because I would have loved to have the number 1 pick. Not that we would have used it on a quarterback anyway, but we could have gotten some good draft capital. So before I go into these playoff acquisitions, don't forget to like and subscribe. Hit that notification button so you get all the drops. We also have the Thursday night preview coming up on Thursday morning. We may even drop it a little bit earlier on Wednesday if we have the opportunity to preview the Cowboys-Seahawks game. So get that notification bell so you can be the first to know when it drops on YouTube. Let's go for these playoff acquisitions. And these are kind of obvious. 2 are handcuffs, and 1 here is a guy that is currently on IR that is scheduled to possibly come off IR. First handcuff is Eli Mitchell. If he's not owned in your leagues, go pick him up, because if anything happens to Christian McCaffrey, especially if they're a McCaffrey owner, but anything happens to McCaffrey, you get yourself a running back 1, and he could be the league winner for you if that were to happen right before or during the playoff run. Next is Kenneth Gainwell for the same reason. You have a top-tier team, number 1 team in the NFL in my books, and you have an opportunity to grab a running back that has been successful when he's gotten his opportunities, but is playing behind DeAndre Swift. And then the last guy is Josh Palmer. Josh Palmer is on IR. There's no timetable for his return, but if you have a stash option and are weak in the receivers and are looking to get somebody out there, he has been definitely the best number 2 option for the Chargers when healthy. I think if he's able to come back in the next couple weeks or during your playoff run, he is somebody that is an immediate wide receiver, flex wide receiver, low-end wide receiver 2 option that could give you top numbers, because they're going to have to throw the ball. The way the Chargers have been playing, they don't have a second option. It's shown. I mean, they pretty much benched Quentin Johnson this past game. So Josh Palmer's a stash play here. He may not return, so just caveat to the whole thing and a little warning. If you do get him, he doesn't return. I'm not the one who's doing the medical. I'm not the issues with him. I'm not the one taking him off IR. But that being said, I believe he's probably going to be the best receiver out there on waivers right now, because everybody else should be already gobbled up. And as always, to end the waiver wire episode, we are going to talk about QB streamers. There's 2 here, and here's one of the guys has been on our list a couple times already, and I already had him on a list a couple weeks ago in terms of guy that you could stream and also keep rest of the season. and I believe another guy here is a good streaming option this week. Number 1 is Russell Wilson. Russ is back. He's 51% owned. He is playing Houston this week, who Houston just was up in a shootout this past game here. I think he has an opportunity, the way he's playing, the way he's moving around the pocket and getting out of the pocket to make plays. He's sitting himself right around that 20 fantasy points per game average for you, which is kind of your benchmark that you want for a quarterback. I'm not looking to see if he's going to get me 38 points, but if you need to stream a quarterback, for example, I've got Justin Fields on my team. Next week he's on bye. I'm looking to play someone like Russell Wilson in a matchup against Houston that I can guarantee myself a solid 20 points for my quarterback. If he gets an extra touchdown there and hits me 26 points, great. But I know at least he's been using his legs a lot more like he was back in Seattle, and he's been getting the ball to his receivers in space, which is what you need as a quarterback. And he doesn't seem to be that frazzled in the backfield like he was in the pocket like he was earlier in the season. Our second one is Kenny Pickett. We mentioned Kenny Pickett the past couple weeks as a cautionary start. The touchdowns aren't there. I get that. I mean, Johnson should have had a touchdown. Should have been called a touchdown. It was hit or miss in that one. I think if had they called it a touchdown, they would not have reversed it. But either way, he is still moving the ball down the field. That team's moving the ball down the field better. He plays Arizona, who just got absolutely thrashed by Matt Stafford for 4 touchdowns. I like Kenny Pickett this week in that matchup, and an opportunity for them to continue this win, put themselves as a playoff team, and maybe gets a couple of scores, at least 1 touchdown I could see coming from him this week. So again, if you're in one of those teams that has a quarterback on bye, look to one of these 2 guys because they're low owned in sleeper leagues. That's all for our waiver wire episode this week. Don't forget to tune in for our Thursday night preview coming up, as well as our weekend slate preview, where we will be dropping all the start, sits, and sleepers for the weekend matchups. That'll be dropping Saturday morning. As always, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.